So we're coming up to 4:30 and the live stream has started. So as soon as we hit 4:30, Mr. Mayor, we'll be ready to begin.
Okie doke.
Anytime you're ready, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Council, SLT members. This is a continuation of the Special Committee of the Whole meeting that started on Monday, November 9th. And I will turn it over to the, I guess we'll do the declaration of the quorum, and we'll do the adoption of the agenda. Madam Clerk?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a continued meeting, so we've already adopted the agenda. We're basically going to pick up exactly where we left off on November the 9th. I see that we do have all of the members of council present, and the treasurer is ready to share her screen whenever the mayor so indulges.
Okay. Madam Quinlan, the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to make my screen larger. And there we are. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming back. So we left off, we finished the public works budget, and now the next item that we have is the community planning and development capital budget. So we have the various projects listed here, and if anyone has any questions, I know that the Director of Community Planning and Development would be more than happy to answer your questions.
And Madam Clerk, do you see any hands showing?
If members...
Oh, Councilor Hildebrand, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I realize we're at the community planning and development stage, but I would like to go back with regards to several items we had discussed at the last meeting. And in my view, I have more information now since I had more time to review those items before we proceed, unless we want to do that at the end of the presentation.
Madam Treasurer, how would you like to proceed?
I think it'd be better if we just save the questions and do it at the end, because we're almost near the end, so I wouldn't mind finishing off the presentation, then we can open up the questions.
Okay, does that suit you, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go to the next one. So the next item, since we didn't have anyone with any questions, is the library capital budget. There are two items. One is the $17,500. This is their regular renewal of computers. They have over a 5-year renewal cycle. And the other item is red circled. So this item here, at the time that we did the budget, we were going to submit it as one of the grants. Right now, the grant that we were going to submit this budget, this capital project, it has changed, and now they've given us an allocation of $112,000, and this project here is not moving forward. So it's red circled, there's no grant, and the 345 is not moving forward. Councillor Hildebrand has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor? Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to that grant and all the details of the grant, when you look at the details there, the renovation of the main floor, basement and office area to allow moving staff out of the main floor areas, going on to add the elevator and all those things. When you look, I'm using the budget book. So the budget book doesn't always line up accurately with the actual presentation. However, if I go back and look in my budget book and I look at page 22, I'm going to read off the items. Item 511, 300511, Fond Hill Library, main door. I go down and I read 526, which is Fond Hill Library, lighting upgrades. I read read item 533, Fond Hill Library, accessibility upgrades to ODA, including installation of elevator. I read Fond Hill Library, basement renovations. I read 552, Fond Hill Library parking lot. Goes on, Fond Hill Library HVAC replacements. This was all put in the capital budget under facilities, which is one of the questions I raised last time. And the amazing thing about all these items that have been put under the facilities budget, they add up to $344,000, which is almost the same ask as the other. And the question I have for the treasurer is, this looks like a duplication of budgets put into the capital budget. Is that a fact?
So the numbers that you're looking at in the facilities budget, those are, that's not for 2021, correct? It's for a future year.
That's correct. It starts in, when I turn back to page 22, it all starts in 2023. I think it starts in 2023 and proceed.
Yeah, that's right. So you are correct, Councillor Hildebrand, that the facilities of the library belong to the facilities. I think the reason why it was highlighted here this year under the library was because we had a grant allocation. But you are correct; those the 2023 numbers is the same as this one here. So I think because we were focusing on this being fully funded by the grant, we brought it in here. But we will make sure that the next time we bring it forward, it only shows up in the facilities budget. So this is not moving forward for 2021. And when 2023 comes around, we're going to make sure it's only in the facilities budget.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other?
For the next, sorry.
Any other questions from any councillors? Not seeing any.
Just as a reminder to members of council, we can't see all of you on our screen. So if you do have a question, please don't hesitate to speak up so that we can know that you have a question.
Okay, so the next one is the municipal drain. And this is to update the drain assessment schedules for these particular drains, Ridgeville and non-municipal drains. So I don't know if there's any questions. The schedules are extremely outdated and they need to be updated. Okay. So Nancy, if somebody can let me know, if I don't hear anything, I'm just going to move on. Yep. The next one is debentures and debt. So as you recall, this year, the town council approved in January the debt and cash management policy and also the reserve policy. So those were two very key policies for the town as we look at the debt levels. So the existing debentures as at December 31st, 2020, so this will be in a month's time at the end of the fiscal year, is about $33.5 million. There will be no new debt to be issued in 2021. We did issue a debt in October for $3.4 million, a debenture, and that was to roll forward what was left of the construction bridge loan for the MCC and also the donation, the pledges, the shortfall, the difference between the cash received and the pledges, and that equaled the $3.4 million. So no new debt for 2021. The sources of funding debt in the budget is the operating debt. So this is funded by tax levy and the interest and principals are included in the operating budget. There's Parkland dedication debt, there's development charge debt, and the interest and principal payments are not part of the operating budget. So the revenue is not included and neither is the expenses. And then there's the MCC donation pledge debt. So that's the outstanding pledges that we have. So I don't know if there are any questions there.
Not hearing any.
Okay, the next schedule here is the 2021 debt schedule. So you'll see it's broken out. The first section is all the debt that the town has, and it's being funded by the operating budget. And so you can see the principal and interest portions there. So $1.5 million of interest and principals of all the projects that are listed there comes out of the operating budget. Then there's development charges. The next section is funded by DC revenue, and that's $1.5 million of interest and principal for the DC. And then there is the debt funded by MCC donation pledges, and that is almost $200,000. So that is the debt schedule for 2021 that we have. So as you recall, the budget for the town is on a modified cash basis. So that means that we have to put all the dollars in the budget that can take care of any of the cash outflows. So principal payments and are also included as an outflow. So that's why we have to budget for that. Okay. And then on this schedule, you can see when the debt on the last column there is completed. So you can see when we start eliminating some of that the debt. This chart here is a really important chart. I think this is the one that best explains the situation from 2021 to 2030. If you look at, I'll use my arrow here. This is this blue line here. So this line here. This is the debt, the existing debt. So if we didn't take out any more debt from now until 2030, this is how the debt level, debt as a percentage of the town's own revenues would decrease. As you recall, the provincial repayment limit is 25%. We can't exceed the 25% limit. In 2021, we're going to be at 15.4%. And then, and if we didn't take any more debt, you know, by 2030, we'd be at 4.4%. Oops, sorry. Now, if you look at the gray dotted line here, this is debt as a percentage of net revenue existing and capital forecast. So these are the projects that we have listed in our budget. And so you could see how the debt level is going up again. So I'm just following the arrow so everyone can see what I'm looking at. So that is to fund the current projects that we have listed in the particular years. So this means that, you know, we wouldn't have enough money in the reserve. So in order to get the projects done, we would have to take out debt. So there's only two ways. The only way you could fund capital projects, one is the in-year transfer of capital dollars to the reserves. And then the other one is issuing debt. The red line that's here, this line here, as you can see, this is the line that is the internal debt limit as per the policy, our debt policy. So what we said in the debt policy is that from 2021 to 2025, the debt limit cannot exceed 20% of the town's own source net revenues. Then from 2025 to 2029, it drops down to 15%. And then afterwards, we want to be down to 10%. So 10% is the ultimate goal. This is best practices. A lot of the municipalities, the regions at 10%, a lot of municipalities are at that level. So we can't jump from 15 to 10% like in a year. It's going to take us from 2021 to 2029 to get to that level, and we have to do it in stages. So this is what the debt policy has expressed. What you have to look at this is that if we fund the capital projects, the existing projects we have on our list, and we have to take out debt because there's not enough money in the reserves. As you can see here, in this period right here, we've actually are violating the policy. We are above the 15%. So there is something that you have to look at. So this chart.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, to further clarify, I wonder if I might make a request in the future to have the dollar amount on maybe on the right, put a right-hand axis on there to show what the dollar, the quantum is of the debt. And further to that, so the 15.4% is equal to $33 million and a few stray ones, I guess. I'm
Yes,
assuming that's right. Is that right?
yeah,
So when you look across there to further interpret this, if you look across and the line takes a step down at year 2025, it takes a step down to 15%. That is still high risk.
yes, that's correct.
By definition, that's still high risk. And when it takes a second step down in year 2029, that's moderate risk. So this is a very useful chart to tell you if you were to save some money and inject some cash in here, you move the line down, and you're still going to be in a fairly risky position. And if I look at the charts that I have, there's very few communities or municipalities that have that kind of a debt level that we have now, and probably don't even have it that level up to 2030 or 2030. So just an observation. So it's important for us to to do something about these debt levels.
Right. And so, that's the importance of the asset management plan being completed in July, because with that, we're going to have up-to-date numbers on the capital assets with the condition assessments of the assets, and it'll give us a better indication of when we actually have to do these projects. And then we can look at how we're going to fund that. A lot of municipalities actually have separate levies, like a capital levy, 1 or 2%, just to keep the funds increasing to the reserves. They have that built into their operating budget.
So in other words, through you, Mr. Mayor, in other words, then, if we're looking at a tax levy of say 3%, and then we will be talking about another 2% on top of it for capital, is that what you're?
Yeah, that's what municipalities do, yes.
Okay.
It's a strategy to increase transfers to reserves. So this is a chart that we do find very helpful, and the reason why it's a percentage, because this chart is a debt as a percentage of the own source revenue, but we can look at putting the dollar amounts.
Teresa.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Charlotte through the mayor. The dollars are on page 108 under the municipal treasurer's adjustment of annual repayment limit. That is where we calculate the net revenues as well as the estimate of the debt payments for future years.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Charlotte. I saw that. What I was thinking was under another axis after 2030 that just shows in round numbers how much the debt is.
It'd have to be a separate graph. Okay, we can look at that. So the next part is the debt-related financial indicators. This is also part of the debt policy that we have these indicators, and we use information from the financial information returns, and that's where we get the information to compare to the other municipalities. There's a couple here that we have to look at. So once again, here is Pelham. The first indicator is a very high risk. This is the debt servicing cost as a percentage of the own source revenues. So this measures the town's ability to service debt payments. A higher number indicates that debt servicing is consuming a higher portion of the operating budget and may constrain the funding that is available for other service deliveries. So that's what this is. So if you look at the other municipalities, the next highest would be, Port Colborne and St. Catharines and Welland at 9, but we're at 13. So we're in the high risk area. And then the other one is this one here. This is the net financial assets or net debt, which is what the town has as a percentage of own source revenues. So this is a measure of the amount that the own source revenue is servicing debt. A ratio less than 1, or a ratio less than 0 indicates the town is in a net debt position, so the liabilities exceed the financial assets. An increase in negative number may indicate challenges for long-term sustainability because an increasing amount of future revenues will be required to pay for the existing debt. So, so that's what that ratio is indicating. So are there any questions on the ratios? The other ones is in the low risk for the town, except for those two are in the high risk. Okay, the next section is reserve and reserve funds. This chart here just helps explain, the operating budget and what the operating budget is paying for, salaries, materials, services, and then we also have money that's transferred to the reserves, and there's also the debt payment. So this is the operating budget on the modified cash basis. The capital budget, the capital expenditures are funded from money from the reserves and the reserve funds. Okay, my screen keeps moving. Okay, reserves. So they're established at the discretion of council as part of the financial strategy to fund programs or capital projects. And reserves are an allocation from the accumulated surplus of the town, and they're not associated with any specific asset. A reserve is generally used to mitigate the impact of fluctuations in operating costs and revenues. A reserve fund, the obligatory reserves are segregated and restricted for a specific purpose, and they represent money set aside either by a bylaw of the municipality or external agreement or a requirement of the provincial legislation. And interest is earned on the reserve funds, and every year at the end of the year, we allocate interest revenue to these reserve funds. And the obligatory reserve funds that the town has is development charges, Parkland dedication, federal gas tax, the OSIF grants, and then other grants as well. So, oops, just a minute. Okay, hold on. What happened here? Just a minute. We're having a little challenge. Okay. Just lost my full screen. Can you still see it?
Yep. Yes.
The reserve forecast, there's a 5-year reserve forecast summary has been prepared to illustrate the long-range financial plan of the town. The following table illustrates the projections based on the current capital plan with reserve transfers from the operating budget to meet the phased-in minimum reserve targets as outlined in the reserve and reserve fund policy, and to provide for future expenditures. Should the approved transfer to the reserve differ from the projection or additional expenditures be incurred, the balances would differ. So the forecast that we're looking is assuming that some projects will be debentured beginning in 2022. And that's what we talked about with the graph that we just saw earlier. I'm just gonna, there, that's better. So the 5-year reserve forecast, so the first column, you'll see the December 31st, 2019 balance. So that's the actual balance per the financial statements. And then the following balances are the projected balances based on what we have as our capital spending. So as you can see there, the reserves aren't, they're not increasing as much as they should, as where we need to have them for the minimum targets. And this graph here.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
Mayor?
Yep. Here, sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I was wondering about a couple of things. We're going to have a presentation on the library later on. Do these numbers match in with the library, specifically the 2019 at a reserve of 139,000?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. And this, okay. The second thing is the working capital. That goes drops off, I would say, rather precipitously from last year to this year.
Right.
You have to manage every penny with your payments, I guess.
So at the end of the fiscal year last year, all this, the surplus went to the working capital reserve, and then at year end, we had a special motion from council to approve us reallocating the working capital, the surplus, to other accounts. So that's why it decreased from $1 million to 139,000, because we're trying to eliminate some of those negative balances in the reserve. So council approved about $962,000 of the surplus to be distributed amongst various reserves.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Reserve fund projection. A 10-year reserve fund projection summary has been prepared to illustrate the long-range financial plan of the town. And these projections have assumed that any projects will be debentured in order to maintain a positive balance in the reserve fund. So we have the development charge reserve fund. So the projected collections for the DC reserve funds are based on the estimates of the anticipated amount, type, and location of residential development within the town between 2019 and 2029. And this is found, all this information is in the DC background study. So we're just looking here at a few years. So the first column here is the actual balance at December 31st, 2019. So the fund, the DC reserve fund is at 1.7 million. And then we're projecting at the end of 2020 to be about close to $1 million. Oops, my mouse keeps changing. So right now to date, I mean, at the beginning, I would say in the second quarter of this year during the COVID period, the DC revenue was quite low, but we're happy to say that right now we have received over $1.5 million this year, which is what we've been anticipating to cover the obligations from that we have under this fund. So that's good news for us. And so, this is, you have the detail of this report in your budget binder, but this is just to show you that the revenue coming in and then the expenses. One of the big things that we do have here that is pressure for the town is, the $1.5 million that we have to collect in interest, in revenue to pay for the principal and interest of the MCC. I don't know if there's any questions here. Okay, the next one is the Parkland Dedication Reserve. And these are the projected collections for Parkland Dedication Reserves are based on historical collections. And we have the 5-year average collections is approximately $365,000. However, there's been significant growth in the recent years, so the projection has been adjusted down at the rate as the development slows. So this is the fund here. And the projection at the end of 2020 is $1 million, but then you could see that here in 2021 and 2022, looking at the capital budget, there's $145,000 to be spent. Wow. And $890,000 to be spent in 2022, which brings the Parkland Dedication Reserve in a negative balance. So I don't know if there's any questions here. So we have to revisit those, the capital spending for those years. Reserve targets. So there's a couple of graphs here in the budget binder, and the first graph depicts 2020 year-end reserves and discretionary reserve fund balances versus the targets. And these are the targets that we have in the reserve policy that was approved by council in January. The second graph depicts the progress that will be made towards the target by meeting the 2024 phase-in target balance. So in order to complete the capital projects and the capital forecast within the specific years and meet the phase-in targets while keeping debt levels as outlined in the debt section, the town will need to increase tax levy supported reserve transfers by about $1 million per year from 2022 to 2025. So that's pretty significant. And this graph actually, I think, really describes it well. So the purple line here that you see, this is the 2020 year-end balances. At the bottom are all the different reserves that you have, building, cemetery, fire, they're all at the bottom. And then the red line that you see here, that's the target balance, that we should be there at that target balance. And then the target range is the whole green section is the target range. So you can really see from this graph that currently we're way below the target balance. And, oops. And if you look at the roads one, the roads is significant because we only went up to $6 million here, but actually the recommended maximum balance for the road is 12 million. So it didn't fit on the graph, but this graph here should be twice the size. And look at where we are with the roads. So that just shows you that there's a risk there that we don't have adequate funds for the roads reserve. And then this graph here, the purple line, once again, is showing the 2020 year-end projection. And the orange line is showing the 2024 phase-in, and then the green line is the target. So once again, this is the roads reserve. This is the target. We should be here. We're actually here, and this is the minimum phase-in by 2024. So by 2024, we'll only reach the orange line, but really we should be at the green line. So that's just, the graph is just showing the gap that we have. So I don't know if there are any questions on the graphs.
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, Federal Gas Tax Reserve Fund. The town has an agreement with the Association of Municipalities pertaining to federal gas tax, and the assumption that all gas tax funds will be applied towards roads capital projects in the year the funds are received. Therefore, there's no balance in the reserve fund. We spend this money. So whatever we receive, we spend it. And I think it's approximately $600,000 that we receive in year. I think it was this year that we received twice the amount. They gave us double the gas tax, but we haven't heard anything for next year. The OSIF funding, provincial funding, once again, all these funds will be spent in year. Therefore, we don't have anything in a reserve fund. We spend the money. And then I won't go through a lot of details, but actually I'll go through them. This is the continuity schedule for the projected reserves. And what's important here with these schedules, and they're all in your binder, is that here's the balance, the projected balance at the end of 2021 for the next 5 years. The minimum target, so this is the IT one, the minimum target should be 134, and we're at minus 22,000. The target reserve balance is 269, but we're saying that by 2024, we should be at 17,000, and according to this chart, we'll be at 18,000. So this one here is meeting its phase-in target. But if you look at the other ones, the fire one, for instance, by 2024, we should be at 503,000 with the minimum target, phase-in target, and we're at minus 7,000. We've got some very large expenditures in the fire, 1.2 million in 2022 and 800,000 according to the capital schedule in 2024. So there's a big gap between what the minimum phase-in balance is, and this is with putting in, like look at the increases. This is an assumption that you're increasing from 225 transfer to reserves to 315 to 473 to 568. So this is that, even with that assumption, we can't meet the phase-in minimum targets. So these are important charts here. The next one is town facilities. The town facilities one, the reason why it looks positive that we're at 433 where the target is 32,000 is that we haven't incorporated the MCC yet. So right now, the assumption is the building is new. It just opened 2 years ago. But when we do the asset management, the next phase, we'll be putting in any of the requirements for the MCC. In the next few years, we shouldn't have a lot of capital spending because the building is new, but in the future we will, and we're going to have to account for that. The parks is almost bang on, so you'll see that we're at 87,000 is the minimum phase-in, and then we'll be at 87,000 our projected balance. So this one's fine. And the roads. So the roads should be at 819. So really, let's go back to the roads. This is the minimum reserve fund balance is 2.8, almost $2.9 million. This is where we should be. The target is 5.8. but we're phasing it in, and we're saying that by 2024, it'd be nice to have 819,000. We're not right now projecting a $270,000 negative balance. And this is by putting in 25% of the increases, 10% in this year, and then 20% in 2024. So with these significant increases to the reserve going from 2.2 million, 2.4, 2.9, 3.2, 3.9, we're still short because the expenditures are so large. So this is one that is a big concern.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor Olson.
Back to the public works. So I guess what we're saying is that if we have to put the extra money into public works, it would go into contributions, and that would be where the tax, the tax levy that you're, I'm not going to say suggested, but used as an example. That's where that would go on the contribution line. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. That's where that's one of the reserves, but that's the one that I would say has one of the biggest pressures.
Yeah.
Especially since we saw the presentation, I think about a month ago, from the consultant that did the roads assessment and the pavement condition assessment, and they also confirmed that there's quite a bit of money that we need to be investing in the roads.
Okay.
The fleet's okay because the phase-in amount is 668 and we're projecting 665, so the fleet is okay. The next one is cemeteries. The phase-in is 10,000. The projection is 12. This one's fine. This one here, water, wastewater. The water, wastewater, BMA did a water, wastewater financial plan that has to be done every 5 years. And so we're following that plan, and the reserves right now are meeting. Well, they're following that plan right now. So I think that you'll see when I get to the water, wastewater, that we actually are putting the money, the adequate amount of money, into the reserves because of the increase in the rates that we have. And the same thing with the water. That was wastewater. So community planning, this one here had a phase-in of 80,000, and we would be at the end of 2024 at 7,000. So this one's short. And the library, actually, the minimum phase is 10,000. They're at 128,000. The library is fine. And the drain should be at 24, and they're at minus 20. So I guess it's minus 24, and they're at minus 20. So I guess it's close. So are there any questions with that? So this is we just wanted to highlight and give different types of examples with the graphs, with these charts, so council really has a good understanding of where we are with the reserves and the capital projections.
Any questions or comments on the presentation? Yep, Councilor Olson.
Yes, and thank you to the treasurer and the deputy for these are excellent reports and charts and very informative. And I appreciate being able to understand things like this. Question for the treasurer. Do we still have the line of credit, approved line of credit? And I believe it was $5 million.
Yes, we actually have, okay, I know it's 7 million. Charlotte, did we go up to 11 for COVID? I think we're
Mayor, yes, we did. We went up to 11.
Yeah,
so we had that as a contingency, but there's nothing borrowed against it at this time.
Yes, so we have $11 million line of credit, and we haven't borrowed anything this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yes, that's good.
So the last part here is we had a budget open house on September 23rd, and what we do is we like to summarize what the requests were and then what the decisions made or where we are with the request. So the first one came from the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. They were requesting $2,500 for the resources, information, and print, and we do have that in the 2021 budget. They were requesting the development of trails and routes, an app, And I think what we found out is the Niagara region has this mobile app for trails, so we don't have to develop that. We can use the region's app. And then there was consideration of active transportation. They were looking at wayfinding signs and the paving of the spur line. That was the one grant that we were looking at applying for, and that's the one that the ministry came back and gave us the $112,000 allocation. So the response to that is that the Director of Public Work is going to look at the cost for the signs, but right now it's not in the 2021 budget. And we're going to always keep looking for grant opportunities to fund the paving of the spur line. So whenever something comes up, we definitely have that on our list for something to fund. But right now it's not in the budget. The next one was shops at Ridgeville. They were requesting 8 more parking spots for shops in Ridgeville. And this is going to be reviewed as part of the parking study that the town of Pelham is currently underway. The next one is updated streetlights and tree trimming in neighborhoods. This is part of the Public Works work plan, so that is in the 2021 budget. Pelham Tennis Association, they had a request to replace and retrofit some of the tennis courts for an estimate of $250,000. We're looking at potential grant opportunities to fund the replacement of the tennis courts. One of the potential capital funding opportunities is the 2022 Summer Games. They are considering having the tennis outdoors here in Pelham, and so I know that the Director of Public Works and the Director of Recreation are talking to the Summer Games with regards to, if we are having the games here, the tennis here in Pelham, that we need some capital funds to retrofit the courts. So right now we're still in discussion. And then in November, a few weeks ago, Hospice Niagara gave a presentation to council for an $85,000 capital request for their expansion in Welland. And they also said that this amount can be received over multiple years. It's not an in-year. So this will be considered as part of the municipal grants. The municipal grants is a separate report that comes to council, and it's going to come to council in the first quarter of next year. We currently have a budget of $25,000 for the municipal grants, and that's where, if there were funds to be allocated from Hospice Niagara, it'll be part of that unless council makes another decision. But that's the summary of where we're at with that request.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, with respect to those municipal grants, we generally have grants given to different service clubs and whatever. If we were to do this and agree to Hospice Niagara, that essentially negates anything else that we would be able to do for any of the service clubs.
That's correct. Yeah.
So is there any way that the municipal grants could be increased, or can that in fact be funded through operating expenses?
They are funded through operating expenses. So the budget is at $25,000. I think it was like 3 years ago, it was at $60,000 and it was reduced to $25,000, but it used to be at $60,000.
So if we're going to fund this through operating, should we not be looking at increasing the municipal grants in our operating budget at this time?
That's the only way we can do it, yes.
So could I make a motion then to increase the municipal grants to help fund the Hospice Niagara? I believe the $85,000, they said that they prefer it over 3 years, but it could be, was it 4 or 5 years that we could fund it?
I think she was open to multiple periods.
So I would.
5 years, it's $17,000 a year if council is willing to fund the full amount.
Yeah. So I think this is important for our area, particularly to have hospice beds close by to Pelham in Welland. I would make a recommendation that we fund it fully and do it over the 5 years.
So, Madam Clerk, would that have to be put forward as a motion?
So I do have it as a motion, but the next meeting that we are doing is for the operating budget. So I believe the appropriateness for the motion would be during the operating budget deliberations in the committee input section.
Thank you. So, Councilor Wink, we will address that at the 5:30 meeting then?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? I see none. And if someone is not on the screen, you have to shout out.
I think Councillor Hildebrand had questions earlier.
Okay, Councilor.
Ms. Quinlan, if you could stop, sorry. Ms. Quinlan, if you could stop sharing your screen, then we'll get the full
Yes,
files
of
back
course.
up. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Stop share. There we go.
There you go. Councilor Hildebrand, you had some questions?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Public Works Director. I have two items within the Public Works budget that I want to talk about. First of all, it's FAC 0321, which is the Old Town Hall. These questions I have today relate to questions I had before. At the time, I requested a report by Mark Schultz see if they could find one because a study was done and a report was done for council by Mark Schultz with regards to deterioration due to the salt at the back of the building. And it all has to do with the design of the ramp that was pushed up against the building because that back of the building is seriously deteriorating. And the other part of that report dealt with the openings in the base of the building which allow animals to come in because there's no screens or anything. And that's for the ventilation of the bottom of the building. So the question I have for the Public Works Director, was the town able to find Mark Schultz's report? Because Mark Schultz had a fire. We tried to contact him and all his reports and data was burned up in the fire. So Mark doesn't have the original report. So we're hoping that the town has that report because that's critical to the repair of the old town hall.
Director of Public Works.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We have not been able to locate those reports as of yet. The budget item FAC 0321 is nothing to do with the exterior of the building. It's to deal with the internal foundations which support the floor. That was identified as part of our facility condition assessment that was completed in 2014 and was identified as a project as part of that report. We are completing a new facility condition assessment, which was done in 2020, actually just wrapped up. And we're actually expecting a revised report in draft format from the consultant on that by the end of the calendar year. And that will help us determine what future projects we do on our facilities as well. So that's still coming.
Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, with regards to another item, which had to do with vehicle 0621, which was the $190,000 tree trimming truck. I was under the impression after I left the last budget meeting that this vehicle was going to be paid for by savings of $75,000 per year, and over a 3-year period, that was going to cover the cost of this vehicle. Is that truly a fact?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, in fact, there will be a phased-in approach where we will reduce our contracted costs with the purchase of that piece of equipment, being able to perform more work in-house. With our 2021 operating budget, within that budget, we have a tree maintenance and pruning and removal contract. We, in fact, reduced that amount in 2021 by $25,000. to help, reduce the operating budget we are presenting to council. So that vehicle, as part of the capital ask, will assist our staff in performing more of the tree maintenance work internally. The goal is, over the next 2 to 3 years, because of the backlog of work we have, we still will require a healthy contribution from a third-party contractor. But over the years, once we get that backlog taken care of, we're hoping that we can come forward with some reduced operating budgets for third-party contractors.
Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Public Works Director, was a justification done for that $190,000 expenditure?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the councilor may be suggesting other options that we looked into with respect to pieces of equipment to complete our forestry work. We did look at the cost of a spider unit. Comparing apples to apples, the forestry truck we're looking at has got a reach of about 35 feet. A comparable unit for a spider unit would be somewhere in the order of $100,000. That would include a trailer that would be able to tow that piece of equipment, compared to the forestry truck ask. One of the issues with the spider unit, it is not as efficient as a forestry truck. It, in fact, will take approximately 10 minutes per setup, whereas with a forestry truck, you're looking at minutes for each location. One of the other issues is that, from a safety perspective, the spider unit is not grounded. So most of our work will be within a road right away where you do have utilities in place. So that particular spider unit is not grounded, so that would cause some safety issues with respect to the operators. The forestry truck is grounded. As well, in order to haul the spider unit, you would need a Class A license. We don't have any A drivers in our current staffing complement, so we'd have to do some training on that as well for towing. So we did look at it. We still feel that it's much more efficient and beneficial to use the forestry truck. Just a reminder, the intention is we really have a truck that's in roads right now that's gone way past its useful life. We're basically getting that equipped with it's a 1-ton truck, has over 250,000 kilometers. It's in very poor shape, and so as a minimum, that truck needs to be replaced. So the thought process was, if we were successful in getting a forestry truck that allowed us to perform forestry work and tree maintenance work more efficiently and more timely, in a lot of cases, then the 1-ton truck that they're actually using now for that operation would be handed down to the roads department, which would ultimately replace the 1-ton truck from the roads department.
Thank you. So if I can I'm sorry, Councillor. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What concerns me is I did a survey of the 3 local communities that are similar to us, and none of them have a forestry truck. One of them doesn't even have an arborist. It's a large expenditure, and we've just seen tonight the curves in our debt level. I'm not sure at this point where I stand with regards to approving this item. I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying yes. What concerns me is one of my neighbors is an ex-manager of public works from a local municipality, and he was telling me of the high risks and the safety assessment and the safety plan you need for using this truck, and the problems that they've occurred. And he didn't even know whether the region had one left. So those are just my general comments. Thank you. Thank you, Public Works Director.
Mr. Mayor?
Before I give you, I yield the floor to you, Councillor. If I could just, I would also like to comment on this. I can't myself back this proposal myself. I'm not in support of it. I've also talked to area municipalities, and it scares me that we are the only municipality our size and like size, a couple even bigger than us. They don't have a truck, and I realize that alone isn't reason enough, but I think it's reason enough to take a second look. So what I would like to see us do, perhaps look at two other options. The option of renting a truck once every 3 months. They tell me these boom trucks can be rented. So perhaps every 3 months the works arborist can line up some work to be done. We go out and rent a truck, whether for a couple of days or for a week, if that's possible. And the other thing that comes to mind is we seem to be a community, a municipality who is looking to share, and I think this is all because of the provincial look at the Niagara region. I'm sure other municipalities would share with us. I'm wondering what the possibility of a shared use of this truck. I know that farmers sometimes share combines. It's a little bit complicated when you're sharing a piece of equipment. Who's going to do maintenance and what have you? It's all got to be spelled out in an agreement. But I'm wondering if maybe this might be something that would fall in that category, because it's not something we have to do June 21st. You don't have to trim a tree. It can easily be done in August, whatever. So that's what I would like to see, is that we defer this for a year and possibly try the rental option. And also look at dual ownership, or not even dual, perhaps even 3 or 4 municipalities. And then if we were defer this, then perhaps we could indeed replace the other truck that is also on the borderline. I'm throwing that out, and I will let council consider that. And doing that, I will now go to Councillor Olson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm sure staff is right with their assessment, and I'm sure there's a business case here. But I think there's a time when you have to defer things and move things back, and I think this might be the time in the interest of the debt. And I'm sorry I have to say that, but I think this might be one of the times. So I would be in favor of voting to defer it to another year, to next year.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that proposal? Good proposal, bad proposal, anything? Councillor Hildebrand.
Obviously, I'm on the same page as Councillor Olson. I know it's a difficult decision. I know we got tree issues. However, the issue with regards to finances and the tax rate that we're going to set is going to be far outweighing deferring this item for a year.
Okay, thank you. And Madame Teresa Quinlan.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, if this item is deferred, the $190,000, I would like to recommend to council that the dollars still remain in the reserves. We can't decrease the allocation to reserves. So maybe we don't spend it on the truck and we move it to one of the reserves, because right now we've only increased our reserves this year by $150,000. And this was a serious concern by the Finance and Audit Committee members, the external members, saying that we're not putting enough money in the reserves. So I have no issue with not purchasing the truck, but I just don't want the dollars to be decreased from the operating budget. That's just my recommendation.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Councillor Wink.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, then to the Director of Public Works, part of your methodology or thinking was that a certain truck was going to be replaced that was aging and no longer useful. How much would it cost to replace that truck?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would be around $90,000 for replacement of the 1 ton.
So we'd still be looking at an outlay of $90,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Is there an opportunity to lease a similar truck?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that the lease is definitely an option. With the amount of kilometers that we put on these types of trucks, we find it better policy to buy and purchase those units. Obviously, it's something that we could consider.
But if you're putting on that much mileage, then a lease doesn't make sense. So I appreciate your comments in that regard. So if we're going to defer a purchase of this truck, are we looking at approving, if we're looking at deferring the purchase of the boom truck, are we okay approving a purchase of a new truck that's required at this point?
I would like to weigh in. I would definitely, I think it's important that we keep the level of the fleet at a certain extent or at a certain level, or else we're going to find out that we're going to have to change 3 or 4 units at once. So I definitely would be happy to do the 90,000 and purchase that truck, but I'd still like the Public Works to explore this year the access of renting a boom truck when we do have work to do, and see how that works for us for this year. And also I'd like to explore if there's any interest out from other municipalities for co-owning, or even 3 municipalities purchasing a boom truck. But I would definitely support the 90,000 other truck that the director mentioned. That's my thoughts. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Stewart?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Quinlan. So if we don't buy the boom truck and we do purchase the other truck, am I clear that you would still like the $190,000 in the budget? So that would buy the truck and then put the excess $100,000 in reserves? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? You have to give some direction here, unless we have to take, and then we put that to a vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to mention that we should have a motion for that so that it can be voted on there by a decision of committee.
Okay. Anyone willing to put a motion forward? Councillor Wink.
So I'll put the motion forward that we defer the purchase of the boom truck at this point in time, taking into consideration the comments that the mayor made, but that we authorize the purchase of a 1-ton truck in the cost of $90,000.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Second, I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Olson, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Comments, questions on this motion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yep.
Yep, sorry.
Yep.
Motions don't need a second. We're in a committee, but I just want to make sure that the motion, are we keeping the $100 to transfer to reserve? That should be part of the motion, if so.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
Keep that in the reserves.
Thank you.
Again?
So then the motion would be to defer the purchase of the boom truck and authorize the purchase of a 1-ton truck at $90,000 and transfer $100,000 to the, that's the roads reserve, Madam Treasurer? Sorry, you're muted.
Well, the roads reserve needs it, but this was part of the fleet purchase, so should we, what do you think, Charlotte?
Through the mayor, the reserve transfers aren't exactly identical to the capital spending from the reserve. So might I suggest that we say the reserve transfers be kept at the budgeted amount? Would that wording work?
I believe that.
So then that would go to the fleet reserve, right, Charlotte?
Yeah, so right through the mayor, right now the capital spending for 2021 for fleet is $349,000. The transfer to reserves is $403,000. So because we're trying to improve those balances, those two amounts aren't necessarily equal. So there isn't really specifically $100,000 transfer. There's $403,000 budgeted to transfer into the fleet reserve. And so I would recommend that if you want to include that in the motion, that you specify that the operating transfers to the fleet reserve would be kept at their budgeted level.
Oh, totally lost.
Councillor Wink?
Yeah, I'm fine with what Charlotte had indicated.
Okay, thank you. Any comments now on the motion, on the recommendation before council? Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, this question is to the Public Works Director. Just so I'm clear, so this 1-ton truck for $90,000 that you want to purchase versus do a high kilometer lease on, what is the purpose of that? I realize it's to replace an aging vehicle, but if you wanted a boom truck for the purposes of forestry work, and now you're doing a 1-ton truck, just so I understand, it's not the same function. So can you just give me kind of the overall on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. So the 1-ton truck that's being replaced is in our roads department. So that's the crews that repair potholes and that type of thing. Right now, our forestry, our arborist and his assistant is using a 1-ton truck to do the cutting with pole saws. So that's why we can only get to 12-foot height for pruning and tree maintenance with that current piece of equipment. So that operation will continue as is, and we'll just specifically be replacing the 1-ton truck in our roads department that needs to be replaced with the new truck.
So to continue on that train, so it won't improve the service, it won't change the level of service, it's just changing out one vehicle that's got many kilometers on it, is aging, and with another vehicle, but the level of service we're able to provide won't change whatsoever.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any, we will call the vote, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just do it in the order that I'm seeing people on the screen. So Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
So the motion passes. Carried.
So Teresa, I believe you're, first of all, any other questions, comments on the, on this proposal, this presentation put forward by the clerk? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Public Works Director. I know we talked a little bit about the summer games and the effect it'll have on the tennis courts. Is there any other report that you want to give at this point with regards to costs or recovery of costs with regards to the summer games and the impact it'll have on the community?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now we have a budget estimate of about $250,000 to redo the courts in Centennial Park to support the possibility of having the 2020 Canada Summer Games tennis competition in Fenwick. We're meeting with a contractor, with timing. Unfortunately, we're meeting with them early this week. We haven't been able to touch base to review the scope of work that needs to be completed. So until that meeting happens, we don't have a detailed estimate, but right now we're using an estimate of about 250,000. Again, until that meeting happens, there hasn't been any further discussions with the Canada Summer Games with respect to what their contributions could be towards this project.
Councillor?
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any, I turn to the clerk.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion made by Councillor Olson that committee receive the 2021 capital budget presentation by the Treasurer, Director of Public Works for information. Members of council will know that I have recorded all of the actions that were voted on, and they will be part of the official record, the recommendations to council and the minutes. So this is just to receive the report for information. Okay, are there any questions or comments?
Not seeing any.
Okay, so I will call the vote starting with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That motion is carried. Mr. Mayor, the next item listed on the agenda is committee input. So if there are any further questions or comments.
Okay, and I will ask again, any questions or comments on the report put forward tonight? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The final item on this agenda before we move into the next meeting. Before we adjourn, I'll just remind members of council that there was a separate Zoom invite for the operating budget meeting. And anyone who has tuned in live stream, we're just concluding the meeting from November the 9th. That was recessed over, and we will move into the operating budget meeting in just a few moments. So I do have a motion by Councillor Stewart that this special meeting of committee be adjourned. And I'll start the vote with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that motion is carried. Mr. Mayor, if you want to conclude this meeting, and then I'm not sure how long, if you want a bit of a break before we resume the next meeting.
Yes, so we will adjourn this meeting, Council, and let's take 5 before we start the next meeting. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.